go ahead and get started. So I want to welcome everyone to Curated Cribs here at the Taubman Museum of Art. I'm Cindy Peterson, the Executive Director, and we'd love to raise a toast to all of our leadership members, our members at the museum, and to our guest, Veronica Vale. So a toast to you. And Veronica, tell us about your signature cocktail.
So this is my signature cocktail. I was lucky enough to be sponsored this month by Maker's Mark for their Art and Soul campaign. So this is their Gold Rush cocktail, which is obviously a signature color of mine as well.
Wonderful. Well, toast to you. Thank you for joining us today from North Carolina and the beach and sharing your studio practices with us and your creative practice. And Veronica and I met at the Sidewalk Art Show, and many of you might have met her as well. She was the winner of the 2022 Paul Ostaseski Memorial Award. And we're just excited to have her here. I'm honored that she has won that award and joining us. And we'll start the conversation with a little bit about Paul and his background. And Paul, and we're going to trade out to show a little bit about Paul. He was born in Albany, New York, and graduated from Patrick Henry High School here in Roanoke and attended Virginia Tech, where he studied architecture before graduating with a Bachelor of Arts in 1970. He worked in commercial advertising for 6 years and before becoming a full-time artist. Paul studied under Dean Carter at Virginia Tech and Peter Redden at Roanoke Fine Arts Center at Cherry Hill, which is now the Taubman Museum of Art. Exactly. Many are familiar with the works of Peter as well. Well known in the Roanoke arts community, Peter was a regular award recipient at the Roanoke Sidewalk Art Show and received Best in Show 3 times, which is a huge honor. And commissioned for several large public works, which we will see a number of them in shortly. And Peter died suddenly in 1982, just as he began to earn a wider recognition and sales outside the Roanoke Valley. Later in 1982, the family established the Paul Ostaseski Memorial Art Fund to endow an award given to a recipient at the annual Taubman Museum of Art Sidewalk Art Show. And this past summer, Veronica Vale received that award. A retrospective exhibition of Paul's work was hosted in January of 2012 at Lindor Arts, and it was organized by his wife, Susan, and his best friend, Dorsey Taylor. And Paul will go in, he's in the permanent collection, and here you see 2 of his works cut into 3 times that he created in 1977 and Free Flight, also that same time period. So we're lucky to have that in our permanent collection, and we've had it on view a number of times throughout the time period that it's been in the permanent collection. Around the area, we have at the Delta Dental at Starkey Road, and Paul's earlier works, as you can see here, were made from scrap pieces of metal before he turned to Corten steel, which has a rust-like patina and does not need to be painted. And Corten steel is often used in large construction projects like railroads and bridges. And it's always, as an artist, to be able to do public works of art is a challenge because it is, large sculptural pieces, and also has to be, as we look around Roanoke area, with the weather, of course, that we encounter. His first studio was on Lee Highway in a rented space behind Riverjack Craft Studio, which was run by Dorsey Taylor. And Dorsey later moved his gallery to Starkey Road, and Paul rented a space next door that allowed him to create these larger works of art. The piece outside of Delta Dental was originally painted silver, and there's a small vertical at Virginia Western Community College. And here we see also the vertical of the Greenway at Ann Masters Sculpture Garden. A number of works were commissioned of Paul's, and his sculptures were about geometry and motion, often appearing to be coming apart or back together, as we see here. This is one of the largest works of Paul's, weighing about over 2,000 pounds. Paul worked on this piece in a welding shop that belonged to Dick Engel, and who had a crane to load the sculpture, as we can imagine. 2,000 pounds, and as well as these pieces. So this will challenge all of us to, view these pieces in our community. The Roanoke County Library, the previous location on 419, is a work of art, and the bird that you see here is one of Susan's most favorite pieces, and it hangs at a neighbor's home. So that's something that she enjoys on a regular basis, as we do his work in our permanent collection. The First Citizens Bank downtown, many of us are familiar with that, and this piece was originally commissioned by Cole's Egg Farm, and the farm was sold and the piece was abandoned. It was eventually saved and sold by Lindor Arts, and now resides, as you see here, at the First Citizens Bank on Church and First. This image shows an example of Paul's signature, that last one there, where you can see the small P overlapping with a larger O, and then the year. So that's something we'll have to look at a little bit closer as you explore those public sculptures and see those signatures. So Paul was a beloved artist, as we've learned in our community, and we are thankful and grateful that we have his sculptures in our permanent collection, but also in Roanoke and beyond. And with that, we're going to introduce Veronica Vale, 2022 Sidewalk Art Show Paul Ostaseski Memorial Award winner. And Veronica joins us from North Carolina, and she actually resides in Winston-Salem and is a landscape artist based out of Winston-Salem, North Carolina. She was born in Tucson, Arizona, and raised in Raleigh, North Carolina, so not far from Roanoke, Virginia. She earned her BA in Visual Art and her BA in English Literary Studies from Appalachian State University, after which she pursued a career as a fine art consultant in art galleries in Blowing Rock, North Carolina, and Park City, Utah. While living out west, she took a break from art creation to focus on her other passions, mainly travel and rock climbing. And as a rock climber and outdoor enthusiast, she's been privileged to follow adventure to many breathtaking scenes of inspiration, which we see in her works, and has found joy in documenting these wild scenes along the way, from her former home in the Alpine Mountains of Utah to her travels throughout the Western US. And with that, I welcome Veronica Vale to Curated Cribs. Thank you, Veronica, for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. You have no idea what an honor it is. And thank you for choosing me for this award. It means the world to me, especially so early in my art career. I truly appreciate it. So thank you all for joining me today. I really, really appreciate it. If we go to the next slide, it's just a little bit about the Sidewalk Art Show. These are just some scenes that I took from my first experience there, and what an incredible experience that was. I was joking my husband that these are my people, because I had prints and other art pillows for sale, but people would come up and they would say, "Oh no, we only buy original art." And I was like, you are my people. I love the appreciation for art that Roanoke has. And that's my husband actually crossing the finish line of the Ironman triathlon, because it happened to be that weekend as well. So you all are lucky to have a great arts and outdoor scene, which is just absolutely my place. And in the next slide, I just have a couple of pictures from the Paul Ostaseski Memorial Award, which was such a special award to be given and presented by his widow, Susan, who is just the loveliest person. And she was presenting it with tears in her eyes. Of course, I had tears in my eyes, and then my family was there and they had tears. So it was a weepy mess. It was beautiful, and such a special, heartwarming moment to me. This was my third ever big art fair. So it was really very encouraging to receive this award, not to mention being inspired by Paul's work and the fact that he was a working artist. And as a working artist myself who does this full time, I really can appreciate the challenges that go into that, but how rewarding it can be as well. And I think that Susan and her family understand that as well. So I really appreciated that. And had a chance to meet, of course, Cindy from the Taubman and the team at the Taubman, which was so wonderful. And just a gorgeous, gorgeous museum. Almost looks like the Louvre if it was a ship. It's just absolutely beautiful. So in the next slide, just a few more pictures of me with Susan and Cindy. And I'm honored to have Cindy have one of my works in her personal collection, which is just flattering beyond belief and almost an award in and of itself. And
well, I love your piece that I bought, but you know, it was wonderful to see people at Sidewalk Art Show just enjoy your work and ask questions, like you said, you know, wanting to own a work of art from a working artist.
And I love that. I mean, that's just what my whole career is about. So it's been a joy. In my next slide, I just have a few examples of my work for anyone unfamiliar. I paint a lot of landscapes, as Cindy mentioned, from my travels, but also from home. And I'm very attracted to those, to combining more painterly expressions with more graphic design elements. So you might notice some more clean lines. I really like kind of subtle cultivation and refinement in my work that creates these strong compositions with these linear elements. I was raised by a graphic designer who has been working on this gorgeous graphic novel most of my life. So I've been surrounded by the clean lines and strong compositions and beauty of graphic design and graphic novels most of my life, which definitely has a strong influence in my work. But of course, I love this softer color palette and a simultaneous vibrancy with softness. I remember someone came into my tent and asked me how I would describe my color palette. And without thinking, I just said, vibrant pastel. And then I started laughing because I thought, well, that's an oxymoron. But the more I thought about it, I was like, you know, it kind of feels true. I think it's paradoxical, but it somehow still rings true to me that I like pumping up the vibrancy of those hues, not only capturing the landscape, but capturing what that landscape felt like. So kind of like when you're on a beautiful experience, if you have a gorgeous sunset and you take your camera out and you snap a picture and you look at it and it's just flat and dull and the picture did not do justice to the moment, I like through my work to kind of imbue my paintings with the energy and the colors of that moment. Even if they look unnatural, the colors look somewhat unnatural in the paintings, it has the same energy as the piece itself. So that's a little synopsis of my style for those unfamiliar.
Well, and I think, you know, you sum that up where you bring that energy, you know, to the canvas. You know, like you said, the picture to do justice to the moment. I think we've all felt like that, where you're in the space and you want to remember it and you take a photo and you get back and you're like, oh, that just didn't do justice. So,
yeah. Or you're showing someone and you're like, I promise you it was so much more magical in person.
Exactly.
So in my next slide here, I have a little bit of a tour of my studio because I can't be there right now. I'm at the beach. So this is what my studio looks like in Winston-Salem. And while it started with this one room of my house, which I've just loved creating in with the bright space, but now that my art business has taken off quite a bit, it's now taken over a lot more space in my house. So I'm grateful I have a very incredibly supportive husband who is okay with art being in every room of the home. And so now this is the space that I solely create. It used to be where I would also package and ship orders and would do all of the behind the scenes work of being a working artist. But now I have a separate space for that as well, a separate room for my print shop and a separate room for art fair supplies. So lucky to have that balance there. And actually, my husband it's been lucky enough that my husband has actually been able to leave his job to join my business full time. So now it is a 2-person venture, and he is now my business partner. So it's been really, really rewarding.
Congratulations. That's a huge leap, which it means, like you said, you've been growing.
Yes, it is terrifying and thrilling that my art is the only thing keeping the lights on. And so in my next slide, I also have, it's a little sneak into my studio, but it's also a little sneak into my process. So this is a time-lapse video of me painting the piece on the right, which is Pilot Mountain Tulips, which is a scene from my home, Winston-Salem. And so you can see I really start my paintings by priming, or most of the time by priming my canvas in a bright color to kind of give it warmth and energy before you start adding other elements on top of that. I sketch out my composition, and then I go in with my foreground. A strong thing that I really like to do in my work is I like to have a very strong foreground and background combination. So this is a prime example of that I really love. But of course, the process that you see here is in the studio, but I like to say that my artistic process starts long before then. It starts out in nature. It starts on vacation, like this, for instance. I'm taking lots of reference photos. It starts in those experiences where you try to just be present for the moment and capture those one-of-a-kind memories, one-of-a-kind moments. And I sometimes plein air paint, and I sometimes bring my sketchbook, but most of the time I just try to live in the moment, in the landscape. And then I typically use multiple reference photos for my paintings, because I find that the experience of the landscape can't be captured in one photograph. So I'll photograph the natural flora and fauna. I'll photograph that gorgeous mountain vista, that sunset that was breathtaking, that didn't happen to be at the same time as I saw another feature. And then I combine those reference photos into what it felt like to be there.
And talk a little bit more about that, Veronica. Do you, when you're doing that as references, do you have it spread out in that space that we saw with the studio? Do you pin things up? Do you have, sketching, like you said, some sketching, but you're really in the moment and you're feeling the feel that you bring over in your paintings.
Yeah, I like to try to keep my studio as clean as possible, because I find that otherwise it clutters what I'm thinking for the painting. If there's too much going on in my studio, then I'm not able to rein in a limited color palette for a piece or find out exactly. So I only have reference photos for that one particular piece that I'm working on spread out throughout. And then of course I just tape it all around. But sometimes I'll go into Photoshop and I will actually just crudely kind of Photoshop around, okay, well, I loved this mountain view, but I really loved the softness of the light here, but I loved these particular flowers here, and I'll kind of Photoshop together a rough composition, and then I'll sketch it out a couple of times and then do the prime of my canvas and then sketch it out on the painting itself before I go in and start painting.
Fabulous. And where is this one again?
So this is Pilot Mountain, and it's in Winston-Salem. It's probably our most famous signature mountain that we have. It's a very unique shape. So it really feels like home to me. And in the next slide, I have another short time lapse for you all to see, again, just a little insight into the process. And this one is a little further from my home now, more of my home that I used to have. I worked for a couple of years out in Park City, Utah, and it was absolutely gorgeous out there. And I worked as a fine art consultant in a wonderful art gallery called Gallery Mar. And this was one of the views from right down the street of my home. So you might notice a lot of more alpine views, which you might not find here in the Southeast, but they were once home to me as well. So they're also very, very significant to me.
Beautiful. Now this one's a round. So talk about, do you, that a round versus square versus triangle or rectangle?
That is one of my latest fascinations, is playing around with different shapes, and therefore challenging myself to create strong and dynamic compositions within unique shapes. They say that limitations encourage creativity. And I think having certain limitations, like having a round canvas or having a canvas that's longer than it is wide, and it's a very unique shape, it kind of forces creativity with the composition. And I really love to see what I can make with that. So lately I've been loving experimenting with canvas sizes. Round canvases have been, you'll see plenty more. I think I have a couple at the end of the slideshow as well that you'll see. And one actually that I did around Roanoke that I believe is owned by a Roanoke collector now as well. And we can go to the next slide if you're ready. And so I have this slide here just to show a little bit of the evolution of my work. This piece on the left, I consider one of my breakthrough pieces early on in my art career. And that was when I kind of discovered what my landscape style would look and feel like. I wanted to capture, as I mentioned, the feeling of a landscape without depicting it realistically. And so I have some more linear elements. I had a bit of a breakthrough, one of those you almost give up on a painting and then you do something that just makes it feel like, okay, this is what I'm supposed to have done all along. And it was one of those moments where it wasn't quite looking how I wanted it to. And I just took out a Sharpie and I just started outlining the flowers. And something about that, it gave it the graphic quality that I love. It gave it a little bit more of a pop, and it just felt the most me. And I consider this one of my breakthrough paintings. But the work on the right is of Grandfather Mountain, the Mile High Swinging Bridge in Boone, North Carolina. If you've ever been there, it's a gorgeous, gorgeous scene. But you can see it still has a very similar style to my previous work from 2 years ago, with the outlines and with more of the graphic elements. But in this case, I've spent a little bit more time with the pieces. And I think that I've been very fortunate through being able to sell my work that I can actually spend more time with each piece. And am not rushed to create more and more. And I can really, instead of spending a couple of days with a piece, spend a couple of weeks with a piece. And I think it does make a difference when it comes to attention to detail and really putting as much of my heart and soul into every square inch of that canvas as I can.
Well, and that leads to a question, is when do you know that a piece is done? So like, exactly. I can hear everybody laughing because that is a question that artists receive, just like ourselves in the creative process and on anything from writing to a project you're working on. But you just said, you had days, now you have weeks as you're looking at details. So talk about when do you know when a piece is
I think the line between overworking a piece and having it just right is so narrow that it is very nerve-wracking as an artist to not overwork your painting. My mother is also, as I mentioned, an artist, and she's one of those artists that will work on a piece until you're like, I need to yank this away from you, or you're going to work on it forever. And I feel I run the risk of that as well. But for me, it's when I walk away and I don't have any more complaints. I can be very critical of my own work and I keep going in and in, but when I walk away and I have to leave the studio, go downstairs, go do something else, and then come back to it. And when I come back to it and immediately see something, I go and revise it. But if I come back to it and with fresh eyes and I go, oh, then I know, okay, let's work on the next one.
Great, thank you. Yeah.
It's still a work in progress learning how to know that moment though. But you'll also notice in this piece here, I've got the bridge in there as well. I've started recently kind of incorporating more architectural elements with the landscape. And in the next slide, you can see that I've started exploring cityscapes. And so that's taking that to another extreme. And it has definitely forced me to be a lot more patient than I think I am naturally, but I appreciate that because I think it's improved my work. I like to make these cityscapes almost feel like they're landscapes rather than cityscapes. So to me, they have the softness and excitement of a landscape while still having those crisp lines and silhouetted forms that you know of a cityscape. So that's been a lot of fun to experiment with and then to incorporate back into my traditional landscape work.
And which cities are these two portrayed here?
So here on the left is Winston-Salem, which is where I'm living now. And these are the daffodils that grow beautifully around the area, especially in February. And this on the right is the Raleigh cityscape with dogwood flowers. So it's kind of my home then, my home now, my home then. And if you go to the next slide, you can see how I've tried to marry these two styles, where I take some architectural aspects and some instances of man-made material into the landscape to kind of see how the human experience can interweave itself with the landscape in really beautiful ways. Because a lot of times we experience the landscape not completely remotely, but usually in this context, usually when you're driving down the highway and there's just a gorgeous view splashing across your dashboard, or you're in a beautiful mountain lodge home and it just feels warm and cozy. And I like to see how the human architectural element can blend and harmonize with the landscape.
And where are these two views from?
So the left is, that was my backyard when I lived in Utah. So we used to joke that the Grinch lived up on that mountain. It was just, it looked like Whoville. It was gorgeous.
Yes.
On the right is another scene of Pilot Mountain, and that's the scene that you see when you're driving out west. So whenever you're going on an adventure west, you know that you're going to pass that gorgeous scene. And so it's very important to me, and a lot of people around here find that a very relatable landscape.
Well, and that's a great word in terms of phrase of relatable. So as you look at your works and those vibrant pastels that you're using and the landscape of that personal touch, but yet relatable to those that are looking. So that that magical sense that you bring to the canvas.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, I think relatable landscape is very important to me, as well as accessible art. I think art should be for everybody. And I love painting scenes from distant travels that perhaps are more remote. I am an avid rock climber, so I'll be up on a mountain and see a scene that not many people can experience, and I love to capture that. But sometimes I love to capture the scenes that I know are very sentimental to people just as much as they are to me. And those are the scenes that we traverse in our everyday. So I think these are two good examples of that. And you're welcome to hit the next slide. And so speaking of, this is actually the Roanoke skyline that I did for the Sidewalk Art Show. You all probably recognize this scene here. I have some lovely dogwood flowers along the bottom and a view of Roanoke. And in the middle, you can see a video that I took from this spot itself that was originally its inspiration, which was from the top of Roanoke Star. And so this is another example of how I've been interested in blending the landscape with architectural elements, cityscape. This is a cityscape, but it feels more like you're looking at a landscape, which I really like. And this painting is now owned by a collector in Roanoke who has this exact view. So I think it was a perfect fit. She goes, "That's the view from my window." I was like, well, this is the piece for you.
That's fabulous.
It was really, really wonderful. And you're welcome to slide through. And then, of course, you've seen throughout, I love to incorporate my floral elements. Those were perhaps my first love when it came to painting. I loved capturing these flowers because you have a softness and shading with them, but you can also have some linear moments as well. And they have such a delicacy and yet resiliency that just feels so symbolic of everything I want to be. And this piece on the right, on the left is actually the one in Cindy's collection. And this piece on the right was within the same series. And I liked keeping that strong composition and kind of allowing the florals to have center stage and be just as important. And so I'm ready for the next slide. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about what it was like to to what it's like to be an emerging artist in the 2020s. It's a very unique experience. And I launched my art business in August of 2020, and it was in the heart of the pandemic. So it was a fairly difficult time to be starting your own business. But fortunately, I was lucky enough to have social media and have websites and have an online community, and people were looking to fill their homes with beautiful things, and they were looking online because they couldn't leave their homes. And so it was actually a really great time to connect with people and to collaborate with people from afar. And so I've had a couple of great opportunities. This year is in reference to my Maker's Mark sponsorship through their Art and Soul campaign, an opportunity that came through my social media, through learning how to navigate that as an artist in this day and age. Because I have a background, and this is another example of a collaboration where Shanty Elixir's June champagne, it's this delicious kind of kombucha alcohol-free champagne. They use my work for all their labels, and they're doing one for each season. So you can see there's a spring, a winter. I just finished their summer one, and their fall one should be released soon as well. So that's been a really fun and exciting opportunity to come out of, and that's my dog, creative collaborations through an online community, which has been great. I actually have a background in art gallery work, and I actually worked at an art museum as well. I was an event coordinator for the Reynolda Museum of Art in my home, Winston-Salem, and I worked at many art galleries. So I'm such a fan of an advocate for these art institutions. But I think one thing about it is that these institutions are challenging to get into as an emerging artist. And so in order to have the means and the talent and the funds to grow into an artist worthy of gallery representation, worthy of museum exhibitions, it's really nice to be able to support yourself while you build that art business and art portfolio. And I think that the online community has really allowed me to do that, just that. It's something that I've heard a phrase tossed around a lot, artpreneur, and it's like an artist entrepreneur, because in this day and age, you almost have to be. And fortunately, it's been a lot of fun to learn to market myself as an artist and learn how to make a living out of art online.
Congratulations on both of those.
Oh, thank you. They've been really, really fun collaborations and great businesses to work with. And then in the next slide here, I talk a little bit about my experience coming out of the online community and into the world again, because now that people are coming out of their homes more and more, I am able to meet collectors face to face more, which has been so rewarding. And the Sidewalk Art Show is a great example of that experience. That was my third art fair. And now I've been going to quite a few, and I have happy to have a long list of art fairs lined up for the fall and the winter season that I'm so excited for. But I thought I would give you all a tour of my art fair tent as well, because while I spend most of my weekdays in the studio, I spend most of my weekends in this art fair tent. So it feels just as much a part of my artistic process. So this, you can see a little bit into my tent, where I have original paintings hanging on the walls. Along the table, I have some high quality reproductions, and I've just, in the background, if you can see it, started offering some art pillows, which has been a fun way of adding a pop of color as well. So this has been such a fun, mobile, incredible way to meet collectors in person for the first time and get to hear what they love about art, and get to see their reactions in person, which has just made it all the more rewarding.
And Veronica, on that note, what advice do you have for emerging artists as they are creating their space, their art tent, to be on tour?
That's a great question. Well, for emerging artists in general, I think consistency is key. It's just, showing up every day. But for art fair tents, I think that you really want your work to shine. And so for that, you need to make sure to have as streamlined of a setup as you can so that your art takes center stage. So here I have some mesh panel walls and a clean white tent, which most art fairs require, and try to keep it as clean and in the background as possible so that the art can really stand for itself. And art is attributed the value that we give it. And so if you treat your art as valuable as you hope others will, then they will look at it as valuable. So if you have a setup with something kind of messy going on, I think people might not see the value in it as much as if you treat it with a sense of elevation.
Thank you.
Of course. And so this is another example of the art fair tent, and just give you a little sneak in there. And as for art careers in general, I just would love to offer more advice if I can in my short time working on this. But there's this novelist that whose quote I love. His name is E.L. Doctorow, but he says that writing a novel is like driving your car at night. You can only see as far as your headlights, but you can make the whole trip that way. And I just think that's such a great metaphor for a creative arts career. I think that a lot of career paths, you know exactly what you're getting into. If you're going to be a lawyer, you have to go to law school, take the bar. There's very distinct levels. My husband used to be in healthcare, and same thing. But with art, it's really you have to be more intuitive with your art career, and you have to kind of navigate and find the opportunities when you can. And you might not know what the entire career is going to look like, but just follow your instincts and don't pass up on these great opportunities. And this is one of those great opportunities, so I really appreciate it.
That's great advice.
And in my next slide here, it shows a little bit about where I'm going now, my art direction now. And so you can see, we talked a little bit about round canvases and about different, interestingly, uniquely shaped canvases, which I just love because they force me to be a little bit more creative with creating dynamic enough compositions in a unique shape. This one on the left is a piece that sold at Roanoke, the Sidewalk Art Show. This piece on the right is of the Linco Viaduct in Boone, North Carolina. It's part of the Blue Ridge Parkway. It's one of the most signature parts of the parkway. It's just a gorgeous, gorgeous place. But this softness here, I'm starting to, as I mentioned before, spend more time on each piece. And I think it shows in the attention to detail in the foreground and middle ground and background. And I'm really loving getting to really put my full heart and soul and energy into each painting. And I am happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Veronica. So where is this right here?
So this is also the Linco Viaduct in Boone, North Carolina, and this is a painting I did of it. So this is on location there, and I actually lived in Boone for I think 4 or 5 years. That's where I went to school up at App State. So this was a very important scene to me as well. And yeah, this is my my tribute to that time.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Veronica. And I'm going to open it up for questions, additional questions, as we heard from Veronica about her creative process, her vibrant pastels, and your new adventures, like you said, an entrepreneur. So on that aspect.
What is the medium? I wasn't able to go to the art fair, so I didn't know what her medium was.
I should have said that at the top. This is acrylic. So this is acrylic
Thank
paint.
you.
Yes, of course. I love oil paint, and I definitely have dabbled in it. But funny enough, I adopted a dog right as the pandemic hit. I adopted a dog. I quit my job, adopted a dog, and then everybody in the world quit their job and adopted a dog. But he actually couldn't stand to be in my studio because the smell of the oil was so strong, and that worried me. And I thought, well, what does that mean? And so I started dabbling more in acrylic again, and then found that it actually lent itself better to my style because it allows me to capture a little bit more definition rather than that oil is great at the blending, but acrylic allows me to have a little bit more definition in my work, which I love. Plus, as I mentioned, I can be a little bit of an impatient painter, so it allows me to move more quickly through the process.
Thank you.
Veronica, do you have a schedule for painting? Do you have a daily schedule where you paint at certain times or for a certain period of time, or is it just kind of when the mood moves you?
That's a great question. I always say that I think if I waited for inspiration to strike, I might only paint a couple times a year. I think instead I have to get in the studio and the inspiration comes from action. And so I usually start and then I become inspired. So I typically do some of my art business end of the work in the morning, because I think that's when my mind is a little bit sharpest, so I can do more of my marketing work, any writing work that I have, and then in the afternoon from about noon to 5 is when I prefer to paint, because it's a time of day where I really can be creative, but I don't have to necessarily be as honed in. I can kind of be a little bit more go with the flow at that time of day. So that's my personal preference.
Are you painting any seascapes while you're there at the beach?
So I was considering it, but I had such a short window here that I didn't want to take too much away from family time, but I brought some seascapes with me and got up with the sunrise this morning, and it was gorgeous. So I took some photos of these sunrise paintings during the sunrise. It was beautiful, and it gave me references for future as well, which I just loved. So you can see there's a couple of pieces with me here. Brought a mountainscape with me as well, and a floral. These pieces were just in an exhibition that just was taken down this past week, so I brought them with me.
And what's your next adventure as you're traveling?
Oh, my next adventure. Well, we are planning a trip to Puerto Rico, but that might be a little bit more on the horizon. I think my next immediate adventure is I have a 3-day art fair this weekend in Charlotte, North Carolina that I'm very excited for. And then I have an art fair every weekend after that for about 2 months. So it's going to be nuts, but I am very excited. Wouldn't want to be doing anything else. So my adventures are mostly being in the art fair tent and then being back in the studio and starting the cycle all over again.
Well, and you spoke about, as you did that first door opening into your studio, you also said that, you've taken over more of the house with a print shop area and art supplies. Talk about that a little bit, as you've expanded into other spaces.
Yeah, so now I happily get to create in a space that is not cluttered by boxes of packaging supplies and bubble wrap and things like that. So it really helps my creative process. And so upstairs as well, we now have turned another room of our house into a print shop. So we keep all of our print inventory, and that's where we package and ship orders. So whenever someone orders an original piece or orders some high quality reproductions, that's where we package and ship and have the inventory for that as well. And then downstairs, again, my accommodating husband has allowed me to take over our guest room and turn it into art fair storage. So that's where I keep my tent and my tables and everything I need for art fair storage for easy access to our car and back. So that can be a bit of a challenge to have to lug everything there and back, but a very worthwhile one because it's just incredible being out there in front of people.
It's a lot of work. Outdoor shows are a lot of work.
Are you an artist yourself? You sound like you.
No, I'm on the other end of it in terms of working with the museum on the committee for the sidewalk project.
It's definitely a lot of work. It's not for the faint of heart. There's a lot of energy that goes into it, but it's so rewarding. I think you can control as many things as you can too, but you can never control the weather. So as somebody that likes to be a little bit more on top of things, I know it's taught me to let go and let live sometimes when the weather isn't cooperative, but people still come out and they still show up for original art and artists. So I just have to really appreciate that. And it's just so nice to be able to meet people in person and talk to them about why they love a piece. Sometimes if someone buys something on my website, I'm delighted, but I don't get to have as much of the conversation of why this piece, why did this speak to you? Whereas in person, they're like, I'm from Arizona. This piece it reminds me of home. It's just so heartwarming to me. And I get to revel in that experience.
Well, I think it's from the collector's viewpoint is being able to talk to the artist, and it's a personal connection. So, when we have our curated cribs with different collectors, it's about, if it's a living artist, it's about that artist. It's about the connection, the personal connection, not only to, the artwork, but also the person.
It's a win-win.
Any other questions for Veronica or comments? So
many of your early landscapes seem to have a contrasting color outline. Is that something you're continuing, or
I definitely
was that a phase?
So I'm partial to the outline myself. So the outline I think is here to stay.
Okay.
Whether or not it's complementary colors, it really changes depending on what I think the painting calls for.
Okay.
Sometimes it's a stark red line on a otherwise blue or green background, but a lot of times I use also metallic colors for those outlines. So I often do a metallic gold line, which is gorgeous. It's hard to photograph because you can't really see how it shimmers in the light, but that's another advantage of being able to go to these in-person events is people can see for themselves how a painting looks from different angles and how the light affects it, which is really, really special.
Well, we hope you will come and participate in the Sidewalk Art Show next year.
I will be back. You can guarantee that. I can guarantee that.
we look forward to having you back, Veronica. And of course, it coincides again with Iron Man. So your husband would have that
if he's up for it again. I think it kicked his butt a little, but he loved it. He did also.
Well, just participating in that is a win in itself.
That's what I said. Just finishing is absolutely incredible. He said the bike section was there was a while there where it just felt like you were, if you stopped, you would go backwards.
Well, as we end our curated cribs, I'd like to raise a toast again to Veronica for joining us from North Carolina and presenting her studio, her process, and sharing with us. Thank you, Veronica.
Thank you all so much for coming out. I really appreciate it. It's been a pleasure chatting with you all.
And I'd love to read a quote from you. I think it really sums up a lot of what we just heard from the heart. So my landscapes present nature as seen through the eyes of an idealist, one who finds serenity and bliss in the subtle refinement and cultivation of nature's rugged beauty. Each painting then becomes a window into my mind, a postcard from an adventure gone by, and a happy, restful space for a restless mind. How beautifully written.
Well, how beautifully stated.
So, and thank you to everybody joining us for, again, your care and advocacy for the Taubman Museum of Art. It is so wonderful to have this evening with you. And also, again, a toast to in memory of Paul Ostaseski and his work in our community and our permanent collection, and getting to know his process as well.
So touched by his impact to the community. It's so beautiful.
Too, and to Susan and her family for endowing the Paul Ostaseski Memorial Award for the Sidewalk Art Show at the Taubman Museum of Art. Thank you, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.